WADR. Promoting dialogue.
It is 6 p.m. in Dakar and 7 p.m. in Abuja. Good evening and welcome to Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, 94.9 FM and worldwide at wadr.org. First, the headlines. Senegal's Union of Road Transport Operators warns its members against traveling on the road linked to Mali over fears of insecurity. Nigeria strengthens preventive measures at airports following new Ebola outbreak in Central Africa.
Part of the problem we're having is the fact that cases are occurring and action is not being taken. And in many of the parts where it is happening in Ituri is a security compromised area.
Mali and China reaffirm strategic partnership in key sectors including security, and Liberia reinforces ties with Senegal in research, innovation and student exchange programs.
This MOU will benefit the students between our two universities.
And I look forward to the ways that this collaboration can contribute to that.
Please stay tuned for details of these stories and more.
On the news, this is Deborah Amour.
Thank you for joining us. We begin here in Senegal, where the Union of Road Transport Operators has issued a warning to truck drivers to avoid the road linking the country to Mali. This announcement followed a wave of attacks on Senegalese cargo trucks by suspected armed groups along the shared border. At least 11 trucks have been set on fire in recent weeks. These attacks have renewed concerns about the growing insecurity in the Sahel, especially in Mali, and its wider implications on neighboring countries such as Senegal. Francis Boniface tells us more in this report.
Transport unions in Senegal are warning that worsening insecurity in Mali could seriously disrupt trade and supply chains between the two neighboring countries following attacks on targeted cargo trucks traveling along the corridor. The Senegalese Truckers Union has advised Senegalese truck drivers to suspend travel to Mali following the repeated assaults on commercial convoys by suspected terrorists linked to JNIM. The union says at least 11 Senegalese trucks have been burned in several weeks, including after attacks near the town of Kati, close to Bamako. The Dakar-Bamako route serves as a lifeline for the movement of goods from the port of Dakar into landlocked Mali. Hundreds of trucks use the route every week to transport essential commodities. It is particularly important for Mali, which relies heavily on Senegal's port infrastructure for imports and regional trade. Prolonged disruption could affect the availability and cost of goods in Malian markets, especially as demand rises ahead of Tabaski celebrations. In Senegal, thousands of drivers, traders, and logistic workers depend on cross-border commerce between the two countries. However, transport operators say the escalating attacks have created fear among drivers, many of whom now see the journey as increasingly dangerous and unpredictable.
Francis Boniface filed that report. In Nigeria, authorities are strengthening measures at various airports to prevent the Ebola virus from entering the country. The measures come as fears grow over the latest Ebola outbreak in parts of Central Africa. Health experts also warn that delayed responses and weak surveillance could worsen the spread of infectious diseases across West Africa. WADR's Abuja correspondent Yechenusa Setu gives us the details.
The Federal Airports Authority of Nigeria says enhanced surveillance, passenger screening, and emergency response measures have been activated across international airports following the Ebola outbreak in the Democratic Republic of Congo and Uganda. FAN says it is working closely with Port Health Services, the Nigeria Center for Disease Control, and other relevant agencies to monitor passengers arriving from high-risk areas. Recently, Director General of the Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, Jean Kaseya, said the continent is currently in what he described as a panic mode over the outbreak, warning that African countries must urgently strengthen preparedness and response systems. Reacting to the situation, virologist and public health expert Oyewale Tomori says action was taken too late to effectively contain the outbreak at its early stage.
We started too late because when you look at the first case was around 24th of April. Lab diagnosis didn't come up until May 15, almost 3 weeks. By that time, so many cases. I mean, we were reporting 300 or more cases, almost 100 dead. And Ituri is in that area. It's a mining area. It's also a security area. So they don't know where to go.
He also explained that the high fatality rate is largely linked to delayed detection, weak healthcare systems, and limited access to treatment and supportive care in affected communities.
Part of the problem we're having is the fact that cases are occurring and action is not being taken. And in many of the parts where this happened in Ituri, as I said, is a security compromised area. Hospitals are not in the place there. People they have nowhere to go. Therefore, probably treating themselves at home. And that's why the cases came.
The World Health Organization has described the Ebola risk as high at national and regional levels, although global risk remains low. So far, Nigeria has recorded no confirmed case of Ebola, but authorities say surveillance and monitoring remain on high alert. For WADR, Yechenu Sasetu in Abuja.
In Burkina Faso, authorities say nearly 389,000 people have already enrolled in the pilot phase of the country's universal health insurance scheme known as RAMU. This initial phase captures mainly 2 regions and involves the participation of over 400 public and private health facilities across the country. Augustine Koli completes the story.
The National Universal Health Insurance Fund, SINAMU, says the program is currently being tested in the Kajoko and Goriko regions, with more than 430 public and private health structures already affiliated. According to officials, the scheme covers public workers, salaried employees, pensioners, informal sector workers, and over 231,000 dependent family members. More than 3,100 healthcare providers, including pharmacies, laboratories, and health centers, have also signed onto the program. Since services officially began in February this year, over 31,000 public workers and around 50,000 of their relatives have already received medical care under the scheme. Authorities say plans are underway to gradually extend coverage to retirees and more workers in the informal sector. There is no direct mention of extended service of the facilities and increased manpower in Burkina Faso's health sector, but sources say it could add to strategies and reinforcement to the country's emergency preparedness measures.
Augustine Colley with those details. Limited access to quality education, rising unemployment, and a widening skills gap, especially among young people, remain major challenges in many African countries. As part of efforts to address the challenges, academic stakeholders from across sub-Saharan Africa and Europe are meeting in Dakar for the Erasmus Plus Regional Week 2026. The gathering is focused on skills development, academic cooperation, and strengthening educational partnerships between Africa and Europe. Please stay with us for more analysis in the guest segment with Claire Herman, Director General for Education at the European Union Commission.
More stories coming up on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
In diplomatic news, Mali and China have reaffirmed their long-standing strategic partnership. It follows high-level talks held on Tuesday between Malian Foreign Minister Abdoulaye Diop and the Chinese ambassador to Mali, Li Shang. The discussions focused on deepening bilateral cooperation and reaffirming Mali's support for the One China policy. Veronique Njai tells us more.
Malian authorities have recognized the People's Republic of China as a legitimate partner since diplomatic relations were established in 1960, while considering Taiwan as an integral part of Chinese territory. During the meeting, both sides reviewed cooperation in several key sectors, including infrastructure, agriculture, defense, health, education, and energy. China remains one of Mali's leading development partners, supporting major projects such as road and bridge construction, electricity expansion, and sanitation networks. Beijing also contributes to agricultural modernization and technical training programs. The discussions further highlighted broader China-Africa relations ahead of the 2026 Year of People-to-People Exchanges, which will coincide with the 70th anniversary of diplomatic ties between China and several African nations. Mali and China concluded the meeting by reaffirming their commitment to cooperation based on mutual respect, solidarity, and support for Mali's development and security priorities.
Veronique Njai with that report. Now to educational matters. Sheikh Anta Diop University in Senegal and the University of Liberia have formalized a partnership aimed at boosting research, innovation, and student exchange across the region. The move is a new step towards strengthening academic ties in West Africa. The Memorandum of Understanding signed by leaders of both institutions on Wednesday signals a growing push for African universities to collaborate more closely, sharing knowledge, building capacity, and shaping the future of higher education on the continent. Imo Edet was at the signing ceremony and now reports.
The agreement focuses on key areas including joint research, student and faculty exchange programs, and institutional capacity building, an effort both universities say will benefit not just their students but the wider West African region. Speaking at the signing ceremony, the president of the University of Liberia, Laili Maparian, highlighted the importance of African institutions working together to solve shared challenges.
You know, many of our countries have been through big struggles over the decades that have affected the resources available to higher education. At the same time, the costs of higher education have been rising globally, putting many of us in challenging positions. But we have resources to work with, beginning with our people and their intellectual capital, and many of the resources that our countries bring to the table. I think this is a really historic time of African and Pan-African Renaissance where we're going to be looking to ourselves to raise our own boats and our own fortunes, and I look forward to the ways that this collaboration can contribute to that.
For his part, Professor Abdullah Diouf, Director of Cooperation at the Sheikh Anta Diop University, believes partnerships like these create opportunities for innovation, knowledge exchange, and the development of homegrown solutions in areas such as public health, governance, and technology.
And I think that this MOU will benefit the students by the exchange between our two universities. It permits us also to develop many domains between the two universities, and also we can foster joint program research between our two universities.
The partnership also comes at a time when universities across Africa are seeking to expand their international footprint while strengthening regional cooperation. Education is believed such collaborations are critical in addressing issues like brain drain, limited research funding, and the need for more context-specific academic work.
Imo Edet with that report. Meanwhile, a new report on the state of human rights in the Gambia says the country has made notable democratic gains since the 2017 political transition. Freedoms of expression, association, and the media have improved significantly compared to previous years, with citizens increasingly participating in public debate and accountability initiatives. The report by the Edward Francis Small Center for Rights and Justice is titled State of Human Rights in the Gambia 2025. However, it states that the country continues to face major challenges linked to corruption, weak law enforcement, and governance failures. WADR's San Donald Mendy in Banjul tells us more.
A new report warns that weak law enforcement, corruption and governance gaps are still slowing democratic progress despite gains since the country's 2017 political transition. It adds that corruption remains widespread, affecting public service, weakening institutions and eroding public trust in government. The report also raises concerns over access to healthcare, education and social protection. Madi Jobate, founder of the Edward Francis Small Center for Rights and Justice and author of the report, says governance reforms are urgently needed.
It's as a result of the fact that public institutions and officials are not performing their functions as required by the law. So law enforcement is not merely protecting rights, preventing the violation of rights, but rights are also about the delivery of goods and services.
The document further highlights rising pressure on civil and political rights in 2025, including arbitrary arrest, excessive use of force by security forces, restrictions on protest, and selective application of the law against critics. A citizen, Lamin Sonko, shares his concerns.
Institutions like the police, the courthouse is doing better at some point, yes, because it's through them that we know that Oceano is free. It's through them that the gala strugglers and other individuals actually are home today. But this only happen when there is like pressure.
The report also criticized oversight institutions, including the National Assembly, for failing to ensure accountability, noting that audit findings and investigations often do not lead to sanctions. It further points to unresolved controversies, including the disposal of assets linked to former President Yahya Jammeh and the so-called Russian fuel scandal, where allegations raised in audits and parliamentary probes have yet to result in major prosecutions. For Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, Sangdona Mendy reporting from Banjul.
You are listening to Newslink here on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM, online at wadr.org, and streaming live on YouTube and Facebook. Here's a reminder of our headlines. Senegal's Union of Road Transport Operators warns its members against traveling on the road linked to Mali over fears of insecurity. Nigeria strengthens preventive measures at airports following new Ebola outbreak in Central Africa. Mali and China reaffirm strategic partnership in key sectors including security, and Liberia reinforces ties with Senegal in research, innovation, and student exchange programs. We also have the guest interview and sports news coming up. Please stay with us.
Fresh and breaking news all the time. Hear it first as the news breaks, only on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
We head to Guinea, where the ECOWAS Court of Justice has wrapped up its external session held in Conakry. For 2 days, the regional court examined several cases involving human rights violations, administrative disputes, and community-related legal matters. Beyond the hearings, the court also used the session to engage the legal community about the importance of respecting and fully implementing its rulings across member states. Sankule Janko tells us more.
The ECOWAS Court of Justice, during its recent external session in Conakry, examined a total of 24 cases, mainly on alleged violations of fundamental human rights in several member states of the regional bloc. The court also reviewed cases concerning the failure of some member states to comply with its rulings. Frederic Foromo Loa, a Guinean lawyer and human rights advocate, says Guinea must now fully respect decisions issued by the regional legal institution.
The fact that the court has chosen to sit in Guinea this time is unprecedented. It will not only help raise awareness about the court's mandate, mission, and operations, but also encourage authorities to ensure the enforcement of its rulings at the sub-regional level. As human rights activists, we welcome this initiative and are satisfied because from now on, the authorities cannot claim ignorance of this court or fail to implement its decisions.
Civil society groups also say they will now closely monitor implementation of the court's rulings. According to Ibrahima Balaya Jallo, president of the Guinean Civic Forum, enforcement of these decisions is key to justice and accountability.
We hope the lessons have been well learned and that ECOWAS court decisions will now be followed through, because there are many cases in Guinea that have been brought before the ECOWAS court, especially those related to human rights violations. We therefore believe that political will must now be demonstrated, showing that Guinea is returning to democratic principles and respect for human rights.
The ECOWAS Court concluded its off-site session in Conakry with some cases awaiting final judgment, while others were adjourned for further review.
That was a report by WADL's Tiano Alpha Ibrahima Balde in Conakry, presented by Sankule Janko. And now to trade and commerce. The Secretary General of the African Continental Free Trade Area, Wamkele Mene, has made some comments about Africa's journey towards a fully integrated continental market. According to him, the process has been characterized by both significant progress and resistance from some stakeholders across the continent. He says while negotiations helped overcome concerns, some Africans remain hesitant about moving away from fragmented economic systems inherited from the colonial era. From Accra, Nadede Tete gives us the details.
According to the Secretary General of the African Continental Free Trade Area, AFCFTA, Wamkele Mene, the continent's ambition of building a single market of 1.4 billion people depends on stronger coordination in industrial, trade, aviation and competition policies. Speaking on Day 2 of Biashara Africa 2026 under the theme Harnessing Competition as a Catalyst for African Market Integration, Wamkele Mene said Africa's integration agenda required extensive negotiations to build confidence among stakeholders across the continent. He noted that although there was broad commitment to integration, some Africans expressed concerns about abandoning long-standing fragmented economic systems.
As a Pan-Africanist, I was surprised by the pushback and the resistance by some Africans. I was really surprised by the commitment of some Africans to fragmentation and the extent to which some among us desired to maintain that fragmentation and to maintain a colonial economic model.
Wamkele Mene said those concerns were eventually addressed through dialogue and assurances that the continental framework was intended to benefit all member states rather than disadvantage individual economies. According to him, the AFCFTA competition protocol is designed to create a common legal and policy framework that supports both large and small economies while protecting African commerce.
However, we did, of course, overcome that resistance by negotiating and providing comfort that we're not trying to take anybody else's job.
The AFCFTA Secretary General added that the protocol also provides mechanisms for cooperation between continental, regional, and national authorities as Africa works towards deeper market integration. For WDR, Nadede Tete, Accra.
Politics, analysis on major news, social matters, and all. This is A Guest.
As we mentioned earlier, education stakeholders from Africa and Europe are meeting in Dakar, Senegal for the Erasmus Plus Regional Week 2026. The gathering is focused on strengthening academic cooperation, expanding student mobility, and developing skills for the future workforce. Now, organizers say the Erasmus Plus program continues to play a key role in supporting partnerships between African and European institutions through higher education, vocational training, and international exchange opportunities. Claire Herman, Director General for Education at the European Union Commission, speaks to WADR as our guest.
Erasmus Plus program is a European program now open to cooperation with Sub-Saharan Africa. It benefits young people, but also their teachers and also organizations in higher education and also in vocational education and training. For young people themselves, they can benefit from mobility periods abroad in European countries. But for that, they have to go through their universities, which have bilateral agreements with European ones to organize their mobility. It's the same principle for staff of universities wanting to teach or be trained in Europe. In addition to that, without going through their own university, they can apply to the Erasmus Mundus scholarships, which are a little bit different. They are scholarships for master degrees, so a full master in Europe, while the usual Erasmus Plus credit mobility are more mobilities for shorter period in Europe, between 2 months and 12 months, to study in Europe and go back home to finish their degree.
I know that one of the things that was really emphasized is the fact that the curriculum needs a change, especially from a very theoretical perspective in Africa. How does the Erasmus Plus come in?
I think it's an issue in Africa, but also in Europe, that very often employers complain not to find the skills they would need to develop their business. And it's true that nowadays higher education often offers very theoretical knowledge. I think this remark is valid for many of the sectors. And we need, especially in Africa, very practically skilled people able to adapt quickly to the needs of the enterprises, both at higher education system, but also at vocational education systems. I visited a very nice project here in Dakar called Simplon, which trained young people on digital work, so abilities, skills. And with this very practical 9 months training, they were really able to answer the needs of the employers and small enterprises in Dakar, but I'm sure that it's valid also for other countries in the sub-region.
I did know you did mention that some employers find it difficult to get people that match their skills. However, I also know that the Erasmus has the Erasmus internship programs. Has this been tailored in Africa, and how would it help with employability of young Africans?
We have this mobility scheme, which is called International Credit Mobility, through which students can go abroad for learning at the university, but they can also combine and use this scheme to do a traineeship in an enterprise in Europe. And the opposite is also true. You can host in Dakar, for example, in Senegal, European students wanting to do a traineeship in an enterprise. So we also foster this kind of mobility, which beyond formal studies can improve the connection between the study time and the employment at university.
That was our guest for today, Claire Herman, Director General for Education at the European Union Commission, speaking to WADR's Veronique Njai. And now for some sports stories. South Africa's Gift Leotlela has claimed his first Diamond League title after winning the men's 100 meters in Cape with a blistering 9.97 seconds. The 28-year-old edged a tightly packed field in a photo finish, beating Kenya's Ferdinand Omanyala and American Kenny Bednarik, who both clocked 9.98 seconds. American Trayvon Bromell and Australia's Lachlan Kennedy followed in 10.01 seconds, while South Africa's Akani Simbine finished sixth in 10.05 seconds. In football, Arsenal have been crowned the 2025 to 2026 English Premier League champions after a 22-year wait. The Gunners secured the title on Tuesday after Manchester City were held at a 1-1 draw by Bournemouth, ending City's hopes of taking the race to the final day. For Arsenal, it ends a 6-year wait for silverware under manager Mikel Arteta after finishing runners-up in the past 3 seasons. And with that, we've come to the end of this edition of Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. Thank you for listening, and many thanks to Ismaila Kamara and Maudo Ju for the assistance. Do interact with us via our social media platforms, X, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at WADR English. My name is Deborah Amuo. Good evening. We thank you for listening to Newslink in Nigeria on Love FM Abuja and Darling FM Owerri. In the Gambia on Hot FM Banjul, Hilltop FM and Veritas Radio in Serekunda. Thank you for listening on Alternative Youth Radio Lofa County, Liberia, Radio Kegaman in Nimba County, and DCN Radio Riverses County. A big thank you to Radio Baft FM in Sierra Leone for listening, and in Ghana we thank Radio Pad in Damango and Royals FM in Wenchi. Thank you all for listening to Newslink.